What was your journey to leadership like being a woman?
In terms of in corporate America, I think it was the willingness to do anything. Like, no matter what job it is, I've spent a lot of time in warehousing, and you're walking and you pick up the trash, and so I role model a lot of the behaviors that a leader should role model. Okay, I care deeply about people, which sometimes hurts because people disappoint you. But I care about people and I want them to be better. What I didn't understand when I was a younger leader is I'm the boss. You do what I say because I have the title. And that's kind of rough. That's probably my greatest regret.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Finding the Upside. I'm so happy that you joined me today. Today, I'm in the studio and I have a special guest, Julie McManus. Say hi, Julie.
Hey, everybody.
So before we get started, I'm just going to give you a brief background on Julie, and then I'm going to turn it over to her to tell a little bit more about her story and her journey. So Julie is a speaker. She is also has tons of experience in leadership. She's worked in corporate roles. She currently is contracted in companies working inside and leading others through projects. In her speaking role, she inspires others to reach their full potential as leaders and humans, which I love. She's a world traveler. She shares her inspiring messages with thousands of leaders across 5 continents. That's amazing, Julie. I'm jealous. She brings her life experiences to her talks and in her leadership, and she speaks with audiences and people that she touches, removing barriers and stepping into their greatness. She has lots of background, but I am going to turn it over to her to let her share a little bit more about her story. So, Julie, can you share a little more about how you got to where you are and just a little summary of your journey and where you are today and how you got there?
Sure. Thanks, Maria, and Maria's listeners. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My journey has been, I would say, truly amazing. I grew up in a little small town outside of Chicago, between Chicago and Milwaukee. I should have bought property. I still wouldn't be working if I did. But I decided early on that I was going to go to college. Not a lot of people I went to college, ended up getting a graduate degree in industrial organizational psychology, which opened a ton of doors for me. After graduate school, I started working for a consulting firm that took me to Australia for 4 years, did a bunch of hard skills training programs. So we worked in the mines in the outback in Australia and taught the miners how to mine better. And worked in airplane manufacturers, slaughterhouses, banking, insurance, telecommunications, a pager company. Wow. I worked in a tampon company, and that was fun because it was me and a bunch of guys. And so every morning they would test the absorbency of the tampons in my coffee, thinking it was very funny. Every single day to do this. And a lot of that really was just because I said yes, and I wanted to travel, and I never imagined in my greatest dreams that I'd work on 5 different continents. So I spent about half my career in corporate America and half in the consulting side. So not only doing hard skills training, also did soft skills, did a ton of leadership training, which is really humbling to be given the gift to help other leaders to become better leaders. Yeah. So one of the consulting jobs led to, they actually offered me, I was 33, and they called me like 2 years after I left. They're like, hey, you want to come be a vice president for us? And I'm like, oh, sure. So I moved to Virginia. That took me to all sorts of different places as well. I've traveled the U.S. And then right now, myself and a bunch of other people were laid off from a company that I thought I loved, and I thought I was going to stay there forever. And that was such a punch in the gut. I don't wish it on anyone and all the people going through that right now. It's such a, I don't know, horrible experience.
Yes.
I mean, I question my self-worth and what am I going to do, and wallow in self-pity, and no one wants you, no one loves you. But I picked myself up. A friend recommended my me to this other company in a 2 month contract. I just celebrated my year anniversary, and as far as I know, it could be a couple years. So it's just, I
Fantastic.
think the important thing for me is to, it was like say yes, because that
Yeah.
got me to South Africa, and say yes, and that got me to Brazil, and yes, got me to Peru, and so it's you don't necessarily know what's going to be on the other side of yes, but I think saying yes is important in your career because it'll
Yeah.
open up a ton of doors for you. So
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to follow up a couple things you said. First of all, one of the things that we do, my intention in this podcast and specifically this series, One Tough Chick, is really highlighting strong women, women who have followed their path, whether they've encountered barriers, whether they've, had lots of opportunities where they've said yes to, and really just to highlight and shine a light on that,
mhm.
empowered females to show other women what's possible, right? So I love that you say, you said yes, and your journey is one that's so varied and so interesting. And I think you're right that that's a lot of what leads you to the next place. And I think, myself included, I've done things myself that I said yes to. I didn't know where it was going to take me, but I went
Yeah.
for the ride, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And looking back, don't regret that at all. It's been such a blessing. But the other thing I wanted to follow up on, because I think it's timely right now, I share the same background. I worked 20 years in corporate America. I was with a company for 10 years. And very surprisingly, I got laid off. And I
Mhm.
went through the same thing. There's a lot of people who are experiencing this right now. It's awful
It
because
is.
you question, what did I do wrong? What is my self-worth? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? It's terrible.
It is.
And I wish that we could get back to a place where we don't have that as a standard, operating procedure in companies, because that wasn't always the case. That was layoffs and such were, reserved for hard, extraordinary circumstances. And now it's like standard operating procedure. So
Yep. Yep.
anybody who's going through that, I think I could be a testament to this, as well as you, Julie, and many others. I started my own company. I started in consulting. I started getting some gigs, and I was like, okay, I think I have my own business here. So it's possible, right? And it's a
Absolutely.
journey, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And
What?
I'm sorry to
Go
interrupt
ahead.
you.
No, go ahead.
I think more than anything, it's the punch in the gut and the self worth that the money thing stinks. The self worth is horrible though, and all too often we our jobs are us,
Yes.
and so you're no longer needed, but other people need you, and you need you, and so
Yeah.
don't, it's, I know I can just stand up here and say, oh, you'll be fine. It's gonna hurt, but
Yeah.
don't let it damage you.
Yeah.
Figure out, find the mentors, find the people to help you, find somebody to help lift you up, and move on, because
Yeah.
that's what you need to do. So
100%. And I also think, it's so true what you're saying, and so critical to have these messages out there for others to share, because I know when I went through that, there was a lot of shame around it. Like, I'd never been let go of a job in my life. And, you know, um, really, you have to take yourself outside of that. And what you said, what I really want to follow up on, because I've talked about this with some other guests as well. We have a problem in this country where we focus on what we do is who we are, and that's not the case, right? We put so much weight on that, of the job, of our role, of our this. That's a small portion of who we are as a person. Um,
mhm. Yes. Right.
And it's difficult to keep that top of mind in the culture and kind of the normalization of that in our
Hmm.
society in this
Yeah.
country. But we have to start normalizing those conversations that you are not who you are is not what you do. It's what you do.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So, and you're so much more than that. And that's where
Yeah.
the self worth also comes in your value. You know, one of the things that I love to ask leaders like you is leadership is also a passion of mine. And Julie and I are very aligned. I don't think there's any mistake that the people that you attract around you have similar, beliefs, principles, and so on. So we're super aligned in terms of leadership and or background and whatnot. But one of the things that I think is important to discuss is what was your journey to leadership like being a woman? Were there, how did you
Ooh.
establish yourself as a leader? And um, how did you do that? And what barriers did you face?
Okay. So how did I establish myself as a leader? I I think I just automatically I just lead people.
Like a
Like I'm in the
natural
grocery
style?
store. Yeah. Like I'm in the grocery store and I was in New York last weekend and I was helping people find things. You could see people lost. And so naturally it comes natural to me. And I love
Mm,
it. In terms of in corporate America, I think it was the willingness to do anything. Like, no matter what job it is, I've spent a lot of time in warehousing, and you're walking and you pick up the trash, so I role model a lot of the behaviors that a leader should role model. Okay, I care deeply about people, which sometimes hurts because
yeah,
people disappoint you. But I care about people and I want them to be better. What I didn't understand when I was a younger leader is I'm the boss. You do what I say because I have the title, and that's kind of rough. That's probably my greatest regret is because I was really hard on people. I was hard on myself, so I'll be hard on people. But people don't necessarily um, necessarily want to follow someone like that. They do it begrudgingly. They do it because you're the boss, not because they want to. And when you can flip that switch and people want to work for you and they want to be better for themselves and for you and to create a better team, it's just so much more fulfilling for everybody, and you get so much better results. I think barrier wise, I think that one of the things is women, we tend to almost adopt man-like qualities. Well, I need to be a badass. I need to be, rah, 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 and put on the armor and not show any feelings and, don't cry at work and all this other stuff because we're naturally, I think, at a disadvantage because we are women. So we're expected to do so much more and be so much more. And then when we take on maybe some male-like qualities, then we're biatches and we're
mm-hmm.
bullies and we're this and we're that. So it's finding that fine line. I think that's critical.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of some of the barriers, I think pay is a huge barrier. I'll never forget this. I was in a position and I was traveling 100% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
Sunday through, and I got home Friday night. And I had numerous warehouses throughout the country, and we were traveling and we were doing a software implementation. And don't ever do this. The VP of IT goes, "Hey, do you want to know what everyone makes?" Because I was a vice president. "You want to know what everyone makes?" "No, don't tell me." 4 o'clock in the morning, just don't tell me. And he told me, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So a peer was making $100,000 more than I was.
He was a man.
$100,000. I have a graduate degree. I travel 100% of the time. So I reached out to my boss, and he said, "You want to know what he said?"
Yeah, I want to know.
"He has a family and you don't," which he didn't know if I did or not.
Right?
He said, God only gives us what we need, and you make plenty. And 3, you don't negotiate well. I said, you have 2 weeks to make this right, otherwise I'm leaving. And he didn't, and that's what he said. And so I left. So over the years, don't ever really, unless you have to know, don't find out what your peers make. Because if you're working with men, I can tell you they're probably making more than you are for the same title, which is incredibly unfair. And I don't think you have to lose yourself in being a leader. I think I'm a natural empath, and I tried to hide that, and I didn't want people to know that I cared about them when I really did, and I think I was really hard on a lot of people, and I regret that, because I know now that when you bring people along and you help them see they're good and they're part of it and how they fit into the big piece of the puzzle, you get so much more out of people.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And, Julie, I'm on a mission to change the world of work forever, because this is something that I talk about all the time. And you're mentioning it and you're sharing your experience. And I will also say to give yourself some grace, because I, like you, modeled my leading style after what I saw. And what I saw was truly broken. And it
Yeah,
still is. Because
absolutely.
in business and in corporate, it's typical that there's no emotions. I got to care about people. Yeah, you're working with human beings.
Right.
And I often say, what makes you want to work hard for somebody? It's
Yeah.
that they actually give a crap about you, that they
Yes.
actually are interested in where you're going and what your future is and what your path is, and that they want to link arms with you and bring you along and give a
Yeah.
hand out and empower you and all of those things. That's
Yeah.
why people work hard, and that's how you
Yeah.
gain loyalty. And it's so misdirected still in
Oh yeah.
business and corporate today, because it is not the normalized behavior. And we have to
Mhm.
change that.
Yes.
We have to
Yeah.
change that, because it's not working. The biggest thing companies want is loyalty, right?
Yes.
That's the
Yeah.
biggest thing
Yeah.
that companies complain about. We can't keep people. We can't get people. I wonder why. So,
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
and you learned that through your lived experience. So did I.
Right.
I
Yeah.
learned that at some point in my leadership journey, and I mean, my story.
Mhm.
I talk about this. Is I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it differently, and I
Yeah.
proved it worked better. So,
Right. But yes, and we both proved it worked better, and we both got laid off,
right?
and so the people. So how are we going? Oh, I'm asking you. How do we change it? Because it
We
is, man. It's just the difference is like a 360 in terms of people would
we
kill for me. Well, they wouldn't kill, but
right.
they would certainly do an awful lot of things because I care deeply about them.
Well, the way we change it is by talking about it like this, and
Uh-huh.
by sharing these messages, and this is the other thing. This is one of the things that gets me. Leaders suck because they are not trained how to lead, first of all,
Right.
right? They
Yeah.
get promoted because they're good at their job.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's no investment whatsoever. And there's none of this. There's
Right.
none of this that we're talking about, the stuff that actually
Mhm.
works.
Yeah.
And it's not just some pie in the sky thing that we're talking about. There
Mhm.
are plenty. You spoke about this. You said this in your talk. You said there are companies that lead differently, that have different cultures, that
Mhm.
that do these things we're talking about. That actually, not through their words, through their actions, provide that type of experience where they care about the people that work for them. And that
Yes.
has to be intrinsic in the corporate culture, so that leaders can feel comfortable to behave that way. But it's
Correct.
the exact opposite. The behavior that's modeled is what you described and
Yeah.
what I experienced, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Dominance and aggression and
yeah,
so on. It's just
yeah. I'll share this. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before. And this is the thing that I like to say, because it's really hard because the norm is so strong, this broken norm, it's so strong that it's
Hmm.
easy to get pulled into it. And I
Hmm.
remember in my early days of leadership when somebody complained about me for the same things,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know,
Oh
for the
yeah.
same
Yeah.
things. And that was my moment of awakening where I'm like, what? What? I mean, I think I was only a leader for 3, 4 years maybe.
Uh-huh.
And that was where I was like, that's it. I'm not doing what they're doing. Like
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. And
Hmm.
I think we have to saturate the messaging to show that this is what it is. And listen, I am going to say this. How do we change that? Part of it is the broken capitalism that we have in this country.
Yeah.
You know, will that ever change? I don't know. But again,
Mhm.
companies need people, right? Oh, yeah, you got AI, you got all that stuff, but you need people. You still
Right.
need people. And if you want loyalty, there's a way to build it, but it's not what's being done today.
No,
Not.
not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
So I want to talk a little bit about what you shared with the inequity in
Hmm.
pay. Obviously, we just celebrated International Women's Day. There would be more messaging about Equal Pay Day coming up, or maybe that already passed. But we around this celebration, it always comes up the gap in pay between men and women for the same job. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, there's a climate right now that's poo-pooing all of that talk. But
Right.
it's important to understand the things that that boss said to you, that you don't have a family and he does. And you mentioned, first of all, he doesn't know that, right? He didn't know that.
Right.
Um, it shouldn't matter because why would it be different if the role was reversed? You know,
Right. Yeah.
would
Yeah.
it be different? Like that's the most asinine thing I ever heard somebody say.
It really
And
was. Right. Yeah. I was floored at the response.
I mean, we could say, "Oh my God, that's a isolated incident," but I doubt it
Mhm.
is.
No.
I
No.
guarantee that that's the mindset, or the justification, if you will. Um,
Hmm.
so, what are your thoughts about? I mean, you said don't ask what others are making. I feel like we need to, as women, continue to push and support and break barriers to make sure that this conversation and the reasons why this is so wrong
Yes.
get stated. So what do you think? What do you think
Well,
would help?
I, what would help is
Yeah,
that we learn how to negotiate. He was number three that he said
that's
was
true.
right. I don't negotiate well.
Okay,
I had
fair
I
enough.
had so much experience. I was, sometimes I don't think women negotiate well. And if we could train younger women anything is to
Okay.
ask what you're worth because we don't
Mm,
know how to do that. We're just,
mhm.
oh, you're giving me a job. Thank you so much. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And that's all BS, right? We don't know how to ask what we're worth. So, and I think that's the biggest thing. If we could do anything for young women leaders is to figure that out.
And
Because
also,
we'll all see, I think, that men in equal positions are making more than they are.
yeah, and I
Because,
think I think you highlighted an important point. Yes, women need to ask for what they're worth, but in order to ask for what you're worth, you need to work on yourself to own what your self-worth is, right?
correct.
What that
Correct.
is. And I
Yeah.
know, that's also difficult to do in the environment that you might be in, but that's why we do what we do here to
Yeah.
empower women to do that and to
Mhm.
not settle
Yes.
for what they're given.
Right.
Um, and you also have to combat some of the barriers. I don't know if you've gone through this, but I did, where the minute your status changes in terms of single woman, married with children, it's like there's this imposed thing that you're less committed, less dedicated, you don't work as hard. Like
Yeah.
that crap has to stop
Yeah.
because that's what's causing lots of issues rather than a more enlightened attitude and
Right.
you know
Yeah.
a, a tolerance, if you will, not even a tolerance, I hate that word, but like a embracing everybody's contribution and what they're bringing to the table, regardless, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, so anything else you think would help with that? So you said empower young women, like young leaders, but how? How do you think we need to do that?
I think we need to, I mean, seriously, even just teach them negotiation skills.
Hmm.
As I've gotten older, I've walked away from positions because I knew that they weren't willing to pay me what I was worth.
Mm,
And not everybody's in that position.
yeah.
And so it's having the confidence to ask. Well, first you have to know what you're worth. And
Yep.
I think so many women don't understand that.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a larger discussion. I don't know that I'm the best person to answer that question, but once you know what that is, then give them the skills to sit at the table.
Yeah.
And rather than just be grateful that someone's ever actually even talking them about a position, is to confidently say, this is the number that I need and I want,
Yep.
and showing them how to do that.
Yeah. Agreed. I think I learned that on the job as my, as I would say, in each negotiation in each position, I got better at that. But
Yeah.
I think you're right, and that you've got to know what your worth is. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Even today in my own business, this is funny because I'm giving this talk in an event in a couple of months about knowing your worth and charging your worth, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'll just drop this here, something that am talking about, and it was kind of shared with me. Somebody once said to me, well, what's your replication cost? And I was like, what's the replication cost? It's like, what do you mean? What would somebody have to do? Like, if you're charging X, what would somebody have to do in order to replicate your knowledge, your experience, and I was like, well, 35 years of experience,
Exactly.
endless investment in my own skills, education, traditional education, and personal development, and
Yeah.
business school, and all of that. And when you start adding that up, you're like, oh, yeah, I'm not giving the discount. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I
Yeah. And
mean,
I think a lot of women um, will discount not knowing those types of things, or to get in the door, or to whatever, when other folks aren't necessarily doing that. And we're doing ourselves a disservice. I had someone come to the house, and the job was the same and one was way less. Well, why are you way less? Are
mm,
you hungry? And I think people look at that as well in terms of when you're negotiating. Are you even in the ballpark? So you got to do some homework around that.
yeah,
Because people don't want always the cheapest either.
no,
So
no, 100%. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for joining me. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of Finding the Upside.